Hi, Phil Aston here from Now Spinning Magazine with another unboxing video, and this one is epic in everything about it. It's Van Halen. It's Van Halen, the collection Volume 1, because Volume 2 is soon to be with us, the Sammy Hagar years, but this one is 1978 to 1984, and it's the Diamond Dave Roth years, the first 6 iconic Van Halen albums in a box. There's no extra stuff. It is those 6 classic albums. Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you inside the box. I'm going to go through each album so you can see what's in it and how they look and the inner sleeves and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to point out the negatives because there is one, and then I'm going to focus on the positives, for which there are many. So I'm going to talk about the sound, have they been remastered, what's the pressings like, all that kind of stuff. And I'm also going to give a quick run through each album for those of you out there who are just getting into Van Halen, or probably haven't got their albums or just a few and are wondering whether this box is for you. So I'm going to do that as well. So there's a lot to cover, but different sections. So if you just want to see inside the box and then hear about the sound quality, etc., that comes first. And then afterwards, for those who want to dive deeper into these albums, to give you my insight and what it was like for me hearing them and how I would compare these versions to my older pressings where I have them, then that will be on afterwards. So here we go. Let's dive in and have a look inside the box. So this is Van Halen, the collection part 1 of vinyl set of the first 6 Van Halen albums from 1978 to 1984, all on 180 gram vinyl, black vinyl. No splatter stuff here, it's just the traditional black stuff. And this is a well put together box set. There are some things that could be done better, which I'll point out later on in the review. On the back of the cover, back of the box even, is a slipcase that has been used similar to sort of like the Dokken and Motley Crue sets, and the similar type of thing as that. So it's not a lift-up box like Rat. So all the albums are all neatly next to each other, and all the track titles are on the back. So I'll just take them out, and I say I'll go into more detail at the end. So this is the first album. What is different is that the original albums, for me in the UK, didn't have inner sleeves with pictures on. So this is definitely true of the first album. So this was all new to me. So I've got these on vinyl already, some of them, but I didn't have that. Now I've already put mine in inner sleeves, and I'll explain why when I come out of this part of the review. Next is Van Halen 2. The colour is a little bit darker than the original, but again, from my original, came with a poster of Dave Lee Roth doing that. But I think European copies or American copies also had an inner sleeve with the band. So I didn't have this on my copy when it first came out. So it's great to see that as well. The third one in is Women and Children First. And this one comes with a polylined inner sleeve, which I'll show you there. But it also comes with this poster, which I shall open out because it's impossible for me to do under my current camera angle. But it's one that those of you who bought the original album will remember, as it's Dave Lee Roth with his top off chained to a fence. So that's Women and Children First. And then we carry on to Fair Warning, and this also has the inner sleeve exactly the same as the original, and again I've put mine in a anti-static sleeve already. And then we have Diver Down, and this also comes with the same inner sleeve as the original as well. And then last certainly but not least is 1984, which also has the same inner sleeve as the original, and as I've said, I've already put mine in anti-static inner sleeves. So that is all the vinyl albums in this set, all 6 of them. Van Halen 2, Women and Children First, Fair Warning, Diver Down, and 1984. So that's a look inside Van Halen, the collection 1978 to 1984. All on 180 gram vinyl, as you could see. We get inner sleeves that we didn't have them before with the first 2 albums, but you could see when I did the unboxing element of this video that I'd already placed the records in this box set in my own anti-static polyline sleeves, and I said I was going to explain why afterwards. This is why, this little video that's coming up now. Now, there are 180 gram vinyl pressings. You don't need to jump in and start to say what you think about 180 gram vinyl. It's not what this video is about. But there is an aspect of that that has caused my negative comment, which is coming up to do with this video. We get inner sleeves. Now, you know that I would love to have polyline sleeves as the default setting for all new vinyl. But again, this isn't a new thing. For my original pressings, this is Diver Down from 1982. I put my version back then in the early 80s into a polyline sleeve because I didn't like the hard card inner sleeve that came with the original album. The difference now, which makes it a little bit kind of worse, is that 180 gram vinyl is thick and solid, and the inner sleeves, especially the one that came with the first album, and it's great that there is one because this wasn't with my original pressing, so this is wonderful, is that this inner sleeve itself is probably not designed for an album as thick as 180 grams. As you can see with me struggling to get it out here. I did a test. I got some 140 gram vinyl from another set, and they slid in and out of this inner sleeve absolutely fine, although I'd still also put those in an anti-static inner sleeve. So it's the inner sleeves that are actually not quite big or thick enough to house the 180 gram vinyl records. Now, some are better than others, but the first album was the worst case, with the Van Halen 2 being not that far behind it. Now, my thoughts are, well, I'm still talking about this element, is the 180 gram aspect of the box set is seen as a selling point, a positive. It would also be a positive for fans to think through the eyes of the fans as well, is that if it also said all albums are housed in anti-static sleeves, that would be also part of the marketing on the front of the box, giving it that aspect that these albums, these iconic, most important rock albums, should be given the love and care and attention to all everything that's gone into this box. The design, the execution, the people sitting around the table saying how should we put it together, the decisions made and the card stock and everything else, and the vinyl where it's going to be pressed and the remastering, etc. That little element would just see this set sail through. Okay, so that's my negative observation. Okay, that's what it looks like and feels like. What does it sound like? Now, there was nothing on the box that tells you these have been remastered. So in fact, my first thought was they haven't been. And it's Van Halen. Why would you need to remaster anything by Van Halen? It was produced by Ted Templeman, a man whose genius, almost wizardry approach to making records sound like they were recorded yesterday is been unsurpassed. Everything he's ever touched, and especially Van Halen. But bit of digging, and with the thanks of some help from a member of the Now Spinning magazine group as well, they have been remastered. And it does make a difference. Now, my press release I found going back, because these are the 2015 reissues in a box. Okay, the box itself says 2022, and I think it's coming out in the UK where I am, probably because the second box is ready to be launched, and to have a vinyl box of the first 6 albums obviously makes a lot of sense. So there isn't anything on the albums that suggests anything about remastering, apart from the fact next to the original pressing date is the year 2015. Now, these are Rhino remasters in 2015. Now, the mastering engineer was Chris Bellman. Now, his initials are in the dead wax on each of the records, so it's definitely him. They were remastered at Bernie Grundman Mastering Studios, they were listed for these new versions in order to produce the original sound the band had intended, so it says. Now, Chris Bellman has worked alongside Van Halen catalogue for many, many years, and he has a very good reputation. You can go onto Steve Hoffman forums and look this up yourself, but everybody was full favour and support of Chris being involved in these. And you'll see if you go through the pages and pages of responses that the result was very, very favourable. And Bellman cut these remasters from the original 1/4-inch tapes for the CD versions and for these 180-gram vinyl versions, which is what these are. I don't have the 2015 CD versions. Mine are from the year 2000. God, this is complicated. Maybe you can just go and buy a record in the old days. But these are obviously this is for the vinyl set. Okay, so how did I do this? How did I test my ears and my system with these albums? I played them. I played them one after the other at a good Van Halen sized volume, one album after the other. Van Halen albums are always around 30 minutes long, so it's pretty concise. It really is. And the first thing that hit me was hearing them all back to back was not only how good they sound anyway, but how good it made me feel as a person, as a human being on this fairly dull day where I'm recording this. Van Halen music is just joyous, party music, which is why some of my original vinyl albums have not survived, because people put Van Halen on at parties, and parties seem to be pulled towards Van Halen albums. They sound absolutely fantastic. They've all been pressed in Czechoslovakia, which I know some people have sometimes also. It's because there's bad pressings coming from Czechoslovakia. These bad pressings can come from anywhere, and I think Czechoslovakia is probably producing more vinyl albums than anywhere else at the moment. But these, for me, were perfect. Not one crackle, not one click. And just so you know, apart from putting them in anti-static polyline sleeves, I didn't wash them, I didn't wipe them down. I took them straight out of the covers as they were, and put them on my Technics deck, and lowered the stylus, and off I went. And they sounded perfect. They're 180 gram, they're flat, they're heavy, there's no rumble. The only rumble is the rumble of Alex Van Halen's drums and the bass and the musicians and the guitar and the voices, and it just sounds absolutely fantastic. I was absolutely sat in awe at the end of 1984 after starting with the first album, and just hearing these albums again. Although I've never felt that Van Halen had been that far away from my CD player or my turntable anyway, but to experience them like this was fantastic. So they just sounded great. So I needed a reference point. So where I've got the original albums, I put those on. And one of my favourite Van Halen albums is Fair Warning. So I obviously played the remaster. So then I played my original next to it, the same volume, so I didn't change any of the volume settings or any settings at all, turntable, amp, and played it and sat in exactly the same spot. They also sounded great as well, but they were different. It was different. I'm trying to say, was it more depth? Because I can't say it's more bass, because you'll just visualise it being more bass. If I say it was brighter, you'll just think it was more trebly. I would say that the sound stage seemed more concise. Now, this is remastering, not remixed, so nothing has changed levels as such. But there was just something about the feel of the music, the space between the instruments, or the definition, that was different. And as I said, I approached this thinking you can't improve perfection, which is how I view these albums anyway. But maybe you can. As I said, execution-wise, of the inner sleeves apart, these albums sound to me better than they've ever sounded. It's not massive. It's not like some albums that need to be remastered. It's not like a Stephen Wilson thing where he's gone to Jethro Tull's Aqualung and taken the blanket off the speakers. It's not that, but it's enough. It's enough to make me be absolutely thrilled to have this in my collection. I am absolutely thrilled. Now I've got them in my own polyline sleeves, and to play them, I'm absolutely thrilled with this box set and the sound and the quality of the pressings, and also the attention to detail in other ways, which you've seen as I went through the box. So in that respect, it's fantastic. Now, you might find if you go digging about that some people said on these 2015 remastered editions that there were some kind of flaws in the recordings, especially on 1984. The start of Jump, a few seconds in, you can actually there's a few dropouts and things in. Now, as I say that, some of you think, oh, but this isn't something that's from the remastering. It's something that existed on the original tapes. I remember buying the first CD remaster of "Come Taste the Band" by Deep Purple, and on "You Keep on Moving," there's a click quite early on before Coverdale starts singing, and I thought it was a fault on the CD. And I just out of curiosity, I went and got my original vinyl album and turned it up, and there in the background was the same click that I'd never heard before. Think about the squeaky bass drum on "Since I've Been Loving You" by Led Zeppelin, for instance, Led Zeppelin 3. Once you've heard it, you can't not hear it, can you? This isn't like that. You have to really, really, like a train spotter, try and work out there's a dropout on one of Alex's drums. But I think I might have found it the first time I went through, and then after I was just listening to the music and I never noticed it again. But there's more of a rock crunch to the remastered, these versions, than there is to the original. There's a more of a feeling that if when you listen to Van Halen, they are 10 to 12 feet in front of you, okay, and you've been invited to go and stand in front of them while they're rehearsing, but they're managing to rehearse and create the sound like it is on these records, okay. The remastered versions, you're now probably about 8 to 6 feet in front of them, and the speakers are kind of evolved around your head, so everything is coming straight at you from, still in a stereophonic soundstage, but you're closer. It sounds more of a crunch, more of a kind of, you're closer to them, you're more aware of the fingers against the instruments. So you're closer to the original tapes, I guess is the way to say it. So to me, if you're a Van Halen fan and they're one of the most important bands in your life, then you're probably going to want this. And it's £150-ish. I imagine that price might drop a little bit, but I don't know how many of these there are. But if you think that's a lot, but if you then divide it by 6, these albums are £25 each, and to me £25 for a single album seems fine to me. You're buying something that is they're iconic albums, which leads me straight into giving a bit of a background to each one to give you more information if you wish. So this is Van Halen, the first 6 albums, 1978 to 1984. The first one arrived in 1978, and I'll just put that to one side. This album changed so many things. It really did. It changed rock music completely. They were supporting, in the UK, they were supporting Black Sabbath, 1978. I think Sounds magazine newspaper had said that Van Halen was supporting Black Sabbath on their 10th anniversary tour. Van Halen. Think about that. Van Halen. What does that even mean? It's not Judas Priest, or it's not a metal type name, is it? Is it a folk group? It's not a folk group, but it doesn't give anything away, does it? And so there were, and you couldn't hear them on the radio. We just knew that something called Van Halen was going to be supporting Black Sabbath. And I've done a separate video on this album, which goes into a lot more detail, so I'm only going to touch on this. But I remember it as if it was yesterday. One of my friends picking me up at the Wheat Chief near where I lived. We were going into town to go to a rock, one of our favourite places, a rock pub called the Costermonger. And Brian said, I've bought this album by Van Halen, I've stuck it on a tape. And he said, you ought to hear it. I said, well, that's useful because, they're supporting Black Sabbath and it'd be nice to know what they sound like. He put the tape on, and normally whatever we put on a tape in the car, we'd all be talking over each other and saying what we're doing at work and what we're doing, etc. Nobody said a word because none of us had heard anything like it. As soon as that kind of siren noise came in for Running with the Devil, and the thud and the thump, of the bass and the drums, and then that guitar with the right amount of reverb and the space and the scream from Roth. There was nothing like it. And the backing vocals, the vocals, from this back, there was harmonies, there was a commerciality about it. It was just absolutely fantastic. It really, really was. Michael Anthony was like a secret weapon because of his voice as well as anything else. But of course then you've got Eruption comes on after that. I'd always had an idea what a guitar would sound like on its own if you'd just been given the chance to just play. And Eddie Van Halen did that. And it changed everything. You've got to remember that through the 80s, every band on the earth seemed to have an Eddie Van Halen clone, and every vocalist looked like David Lee Roth and tried to be like him. But at this point, there was nothing like these guys. David Lee Roth was born to be an entertainer. Black Sabbath didn't stand a chance. But every track on this album is just a monster. Absolutely every track. Jamie's Crying. There was like pop sensibilities in that. Atomic Punk. Feel Love Tonight, Little Dream, Ice Cream Man. David Lee Roth has got such a great voice for jazz and blues. He has. My wife Sue said that. He's got such a jazzy voice, and he has. But it really was side one. I'm the one, ain't talking about love. This is an album that every home should have one, and You Really Got Me, the definitive version, so definitive that actually the Kinks version just faded into the background, and Van Halen's version of You Really Got Me became the one. It really did. The second album, 1979, at first was seen as a bit of a disappointment. Now there's a difference here. This comes with the inner sleeve with the pictures of the band playing, posing and doing their live shots. My version came with a live poster of David Lee Roth doing the splits, which, for those a little bit of trivia, seconds after that photograph was taken, he landed on the mic stand and broke his foot in 2 places. But as the years have rolled by, I've now realised that this album is just as good in some ways as the first one. Again, albums, vinyl albums. In a CD, you don't have side 2, do you? So you have to think of the sequencing of this. Side 2 opened with Light Up the Sky. Instead of being like track 5 or whatever. It's such a fantastic opening song. Spanish Fly was like Eruption, but with acoustic guitar. DOA, Dead on Arrival, fantastic. Women in Love, Beautiful Girls. Probably slips a little bit in quality then, perhaps. But side 1, Good, Dance the Night Away. Dance the Night Away is like a pop song. And this is another part of their world domination. They appealed to the girls. They appealed to not just blokes. Everybody liked Van Halen. You could dance to Van Halen. You could headbang to Van Halen. They had, you could sing along to Van Halen. You could do anything to Van Halen. Somebody Get Me a Doctor, a fantastic Bottoms Up, and Out of Love Again. A great, great, great rock song. Absolutely superb. So that was Van Halen 2. And then this one pops along. Now, this is also fantastic in that you get, as you probably, I'll bring it up on the screen, but you get the poster here. You get a poster, which was very confusing to being a younger lad back then. I was expecting a poster of the band in full flight on stage or something, but no, it was a picture of David Lee Roth stripped to the waist and chained to a fence. I obviously didn't really want to put that on my bedroom wall, but next door, my sister, who looked at the album, didn't like the music, but looked at the poster and thought, she liked the poster. She had the poster and stuck it on her bedroom wall. So everyone was happy. So again, Van Halen were taking over the world by stealth. There was no escape from Van Halen. But this is also a stunning record, and this record does come with a polyline inner sleeve on its own, so I didn't have to swap this one out. And the Cradle Will Rock, another fantastic opener. Great rock and roll guitar solo. When anything about saying what we're going to do about Junior's grades, about mom and dad not what you spent not studying at school enough. It's good enough for me. Good enough for me. But it's the next two songs. Well, actually, the next two songs could be all of them. Anybody Wants Some. It's almost like experimental. With the way the drums and the guitar riffs and the sound stage. And the remastering here really, really brings this out. And Fools, that kind of like bit of eruption before we settle down into an absolutely bone-crunching riff of their opening to Fools. And it's just immense. Romeo's Delight is fantastic. Tora Tora. And this bit, it's a bit like Black Sabbath, the start of this one. But Loss of Control is good. Take Your Whiskey Home. Again, David Lee Roth with his kind of bluesy, jazzy voice. Could This Be Magic? And in a simple rhyme. Another perfect album. And then my favourite, Mean Street. God, this is good. Mean Street, the opening song. This is also my favourite Van Halen song. It's the one that represents Eddie Van Halen better than anything else. It's dark, it's moody, it's huge, it's grand, it's cinematic. And David Roth, going into all his party mode and his kind of little screams and quips along the way. Here, he's deadly serious. He's deadly serious. And all of the songs on this are dark but strong. And the Mean Street, the outro, that riff, that single note riff and the guitars float across the speakers. It's just so, so powerful. It's just epic. Dirty Movies still might sound like a party song, but it's serious. It's strong. Sinner Swing and Hear About It Later is commercial, melodic, just perfect. It really is. And side 2, Unchained. Another simple riff, but my God, what a song. And towards the end of that song, when the extra guitars come into overdubs, just brilliant. Push Comes to Shove, So This Is Love. Sunday Afternoon in the Park is like so sinister, like something creeping up on you as the sun comes down. It's just so emotive. And then One Foot Out the Door is different, but it's still Van Halen, and the guitar solo is just fierce and imaginative and memorable. Absolutely fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. Diver Down, I used to see was the weaker one of the family. Definitely thought that at the time. Playing it again today, because I've been playing Van Halen for days now. In fact, this is about the 4th time I've done this video, because each time I played it, more's come out. There was a thought that this was kind of throwaway, as if they didn't really know what they wanted to do, if I couldn't find my way into my sleeve. But it wasn't really, because Where Have All the Good Times Gone was their 3rd Kinks cover, You're No Good being off Van Halen 2. And it's a perfect track. It's a perfect production again, but the second track, Hang 'Em High, is like something from the first Van Halen album. It just rocks. Simple riff, the chorus and the verse almost hanging over the same riff. Absolutely brilliant. Cathedral, 1 minute 20 seconds of Eddie playing around with his guitar synth. But because of the remastering, I think there's more definition, there's more depth here. You're closer to Eddie on this. Secrets, Intruder, and Pretty Woman was the single. Side 2 had got Dancing in the Street, little guitars, again, great instrumentals, and I've really got closer to this album. Perhaps Happy Trails, the last 60 seconds, is probably the bit where they probably lose a point. But other than that, Full Bug, etc., is really good. And again, more examples of David Lee Roth being a good jazz vocalist for when he gets older. And then finally, this is the album that I don't have on vinyl from my original copy, because it went to a party and never came home. And actually it did come home, but it had partied too hard. This is this is a fantastic album. I remember I was coming home from work and I didn't want to get on the bus straight away, so I always used to go to H&V, and they were playing some music that had this keyboard intro on it, and I thought that sounds really cool, sounds really groovy. I didn't know what it is, and then it started to go into da da da, and I thought, oh, this is even better. Sounds like it could be a rock band. And then I realised this could be Van Halen, and I went up to the counter and I said, "Who is this?" And they said, "Oh, it's the new Van Halen album." And I missed my bus because I stayed in the shop to listen to the whole album, and it's immaculate. It's immaculate. And I mean, Jump. If all the world leaders, all the problems in the world today, if everyone was put in a room and this was put on, I think everyone would be fine. If everyone listened to Jump, I think everyone would be fine. It's one of the happiest, most positive things, even if you're not quite sure what it means, but it means jump into your life. Just jump. You know, just do it. And then they follow that with typical classic Van Halen with Panama. We're back to the riffs, we're back to the drums, we're back to the kind of typical cinematic, as I've already mentioned before, David Roth's imagery, his visualizations of, like, you know, I close my eyes, I can still see when they motorbike with the cow's horns on the front. It's everything, isn't it? It's just fun. They were fun. Top Jimmy and Drop Dead Legs was one of my favourite tracks. So that solo at the end when Eddie plays that riff, and I said the remastering. Close your eyes and you've been invited to sit on a chair right in front of Eddie Van Halen's amp with him right next to you. It's a wonder you can't smell his aftershave. It just sounds incredible. It really does. And of course, on the other side of that is Hot for Teacher. This might be another place where you might hear the limitations of the source tape, but they used to say that on CD, didn't they? Only because obviously Alex is going for it on the double bass drums, and there might be a mild bit of distortion, but I listened to my original, listened to the CD rather, and it's there as well. So it doesn't matter. But the track that sounds to me where the remastering on this album really lifts it up is I'll Wait. I'll Wait on here it's one of my favourite songs by Van Halen anyway. But it's just fantastic. 4 minutes, 41 seconds of brilliance. It's not a ballad, it's a pop song, but it has meaning and depth, even though it might not sound it is. It's about a cover girl model, you know, and David Roth wanting to get closer to her, but it still has depth and great feeling to it. Girl Gone Bad and House of Pain finished the album, and we're done. So that is all of them. All six Van Halen albums in a box. And it's absolutely fantastic. And I've pointed out what could be done better, but you can fix that by getting your own sleeves, as you've just seen. If it had sounded a bit pants, you can't fix that. If the pressings have been bad, you can't fix that. The pressings and the sound is exciting, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have this in my collection. For me, it was worth it to have these in this, sounding like this in this box. If you've already got them all and you're happy with that, then that's fine. If you've got some of them but not all of them, I would look at this. And if you love Van Halen, but if you've got into Van Halen recently, because again, one of my friends from the Now Spinning Facebook group didn't get into them until the 90s, and now is a massive Van Halen fan. If you're getting into them, then this is a great way. And again, if you look at it individually, £25 per disc, it's a great way to have them all together, where you can keep them all together in a nice slip box as well. So thank you for watching. Thank you for staying the course on this review. And remember, music is the healer and the doctor, and Van Halen certainly are. Thank you again for being here, for supporting me. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, visit the website nowspinning.co.uk, join the Facebook group, see us on the other social channels. Don't forget the podcast. Become a patron, become a YouTube member, and help support Now Spinning magazine as we venture forwards into the world of rock and roll and beyond. Take care everybody, keep spinning those discs, and I shall see you very, very soon.